"Carlos, we've got something," came the hushed voice of Lieutenant Alex Hales from a concealed position a few clicks north. "Orbital scans confirm unidentified vessels breaking through atmosphere. They're landing." Carlos exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around the rifle stock. This wasn't a drill. The intelligence reports had been right. Earth's untouched wilderness had become a target. He signaled to his team. Sergeant Nathan James, a sniper with a reputation for patience rivaling that of the jungle itself, knelt nearby, his weapon trained on the misty horizon. Corporal Ryan Beckett, their demolitions expert, adjusted the straps on his vest, his fingers brushing over an assortment of handmade explosives. These men were more than soldiers. They were ghosts in the jungle, defenders of the unseen war that most of humanity never even realized was being fought. Then came the sky's first wound. A deep, resonant boom echoed through the rainforest as streaks of light cut through the clouds. The jungle's natural sounds, the chirps, rustles, and distant roars, were swallowed by an unnatural silence. Massive, gleaming vessels descended, their hulls dark as a void, their edges bristling with alien machinery. The ground trembled as the ships landed, flattening acres of untouched wilderness beneath their imposing weight. From the belly of the lead ship, a metallic ramp unfolded, steam hissing as it met the damp earth. Carlos adjusted his scope, watching as the invaders emerged. They were tall, armored figures with exoskeletal plating of dull obsidian, their limbs moving with mechanical precision. Their faces, if they had them, were obscured by curved helmets that gleamed under the filtered jungle sunlight. Each carried weapons unlike anything on Earth, pulsing with an eerie blue energy. Hale's voice returned lower now. Confirmed visual. Gander Dominion, no doubt. They're moving in squads, scanning the environment. Carlos cursed under his breath. The Gander were a galactic empire known for their disdain of organic life, favoring artificial ecosystems stripped of unpredictability. To them, Earth's jungles were nothing more than an untamed anomaly, an inconvenience to be rectified. Through his scope, Carlos watched one of the alien commanders stride forward. This one bore intricate engravings on its chest plate, its posture exuding arrogance. He spoke in a guttural, synthesized voice, which the nearby drones translated. "This world is primitive. Its wilderness is an insult to civilization." Another alien soldier stepped forward, holding a jagged, crystalline device. With a dismissive flick of its wrist, it activated a floating holographic projection. The display revealed a sweeping panoramic of Earth's great forests, savannas, and mountains. One by one, the images glitched and distorted, replaced with barren landscapes, scorched earth where life had once flourished. Laughter rippled through the alien ranks. Carlos's grip on his weapon tightened. Then the first act of desecration began. A Gander soldier raised a compact, cylindrical device and hurled it onto a patch of jungle floor. Within seconds, the ground blackened, roots withering into dust, the earth itself dissolving into a sterile gray wasteland. Nearby trees, ancient sentinels of the rainforest, crumbled as though time had accelerated 1,000-fold. Nathan James swore under his breath. They're testing weapons, killing the land before they even start their real work. Carlos knew they had to act, but not yet. Timing was everything. More alien devices were deployed, scorching vibrant life into nothingness. Drones hummed overhead, scanning the terrain, tagging wildlife for sport. A pack of jaguars, drawn by the disturbance, emerged from the underbrush, their golden eyes locked onto the intruders. A Gander soldier turned, its weapon humming as it calibrated a shot. The jungle was home to predators, but it had never faced monsters like these. Carlos gave a silent signal to his team. It was time to warn them. Hales tapped into their encrypted frequency, routing the signal through hacked satellite relays. Within seconds, a shimmering blue light coalesced in front of the Gander ranks, a holographic transmission. The visage of Captain Elias Carlos materialized, his expression cold, unyielding. "This is your only warning," he said. "Leave this planet now." The Gander commander, Ralvek, turned toward the hologram, unimpressed. He studied Carlos as one might regard an insect clinging stubbornly to the last leaf of a dying tree. "You believe yourselves warriors," Ralvek mused, his voice carrying both curiosity and disdain. "You cling to chaos, to the weak and untamed. This jungle is a relic, an obstacle to progress. We will reshape this world into something orderly." Carlos's expression did not change. "This jungle will be your grave." The alien commander chuckled, raising a hand to dismiss the transmission. Humans, always believing they are more than what they are. The hologram flickered out. Ralvek turned to his soldiers. "Burn it all." Flames erupted as incendiary devices were tossed into the underbrush. The jungle, lush and humid, resisted, but the inferno grew. The alien machines roared forward, flattening everything in their path, turning the living forest into an expanse of death. Carlos and his men withdrew deeper into the shadows, slipping beneath the canopy where the light did not reach. The enemy had been warned. They had chosen destruction. Now, it was the jungle's turn to strike back. The jungle had gone silent again, but this time it was not from fear. It was waiting, watching. From his vantage point high in the canopy, Captain Elias Carlos peered through his night vision scope, tracking the movements of the Gander patrol below. 5 soldiers, their obsidian armor gleaming under the moonlight, moved with methodical precision, their energy weapons casting faint blue glows against the blackened earth. They scanned the undergrowth with cold efficiency, stepping over smoldering roots and the charred remains of what had once been a thriving ecosystem. Carlos's earpiece crackled with the controlled voice of Lieutenant Alex Hales. "Squad Beta in position. Targets marked. Sergeant Nathan James, stationed somewhere in the darkness, spoke next. Winds low. Perfect shot." Carlos kept his voice even. "No guns. Not yet. We let the jungle speak first." The Gander had dismissed Earth's wilderness as weak, but they had yet to understand its depths. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and scorched foliage, carried a different kind of energy now, an old, primal force that the invaders had unknowingly awakened. One of the alien soldiers paused, head tilting slightly as if sensing something. It was already too late. A thin vine, indistinguishable from the others in the gloom, snapped upward, tightening around the Gander's leg. With a swift yank, the soldier was dragged into the undergrowth, his body vanishing beneath the living maze of roots and leaves. There was no scream, only a sharp, mechanical chittering from his armor before silence reclaimed him. The remaining soldiers stiffened, weapons raised. They barked something in their guttural tongue, forming a defensive circle. A second soldier took a cautious step back, just as the ground beneath him gave way. A concealed pit, lined with sharpened wooden stakes, swallowed him whole. His armor clattered as he thrashed, impaled in 6 places. Panic rippled through the Gander ranks. Then came the whispers, low, eerie sounds that slithered through the trees. The jungle was alive with voices, whispers that moved with the wind, wrapping around the invaders like an unseen force. It wasn't magic, nor the spirits of the land, but something far more terrifying to an enemy reliant on logic and order. It was deception. It was war. Corporal Ryan Beckett had spent years perfecting the technique. Using small, handcrafted devices hidden in the foliage, he projected distorted human voices in shifting patterns, creating the illusion of unseen figures closing in. The Gander opened fire into the darkness. Energy bolts seared through the jungle, striking nothing. They turned, recalibrating their scanners, but the heat signatures flickered and danced, vanishing as soon as they were detected. The humid air carried their own reflections back at them, making them question what was real and what was not. Then the first strike came. James, perched silently in the canopy, loosed a razor-sharp throwing knife. The blade found its mark in the exposed joint of a soldier's armor, sliding between the plates at the neck. The Gander barely managed a strangled gasp before collapsing. 3 left. Hales and his team moved like shadows through the underbrush. The jungle was their home, their element. They knew every tree, every root, every natural weapon it offered. As one of the gander turned, gun raised, Hales struck from behind, his combat blade sinking deep into the soldier's side. The alien spasmed, convulsed, then stilled. Two, the last pair of soldiers, realizing they were being hunted, abandoned their fallen and took off in a dead sprint toward their outpost. They crashed through the undergrowth, their armor snagging on vines and branches, their heavy footfalls betraying their position. Carlos let them run. They thought they were escaping. They thought they had outpaced the jungle's wrath. Then the ground itself betrayed them. Ryan Beckett's explosives had been placed strategically, woven into vines, buried beneath dead leaves, disguised as the jungle itself. As the first soldier passed over an unassuming patch of earth, the charge detonated. A concussive force sent the alien hurtling through the air, slamming him into a tree trunk with a sickening crunch. One left. The final soldier staggered forward, disoriented, his breathing heavy through his mask. His weapon trembled in his hands. He had never been taught fear, never understood it, until now. Carlos stepped into his path. The gander raised his weapon, but Carlos was faster. A single bullet, silenced and precise, pierced through the alien's visor, ending him before his body hit the ground. The jungle was silent once more. Hales emerged from the shadows, wiping blood from his blade. One patrol down. Plenty more to go. James knelt beside the impaled soldier in the pit, retrieving his knife. They don't bleed like us. It's wrong. Feels like stabbing metal. They aren't like us, Carlos said, scanning the bodies. They don't understand what it means to fight for something real. Beckett adjusted the strap on his explosives pack. They will. Over the next few hours, the battle unfolded in fragments of shadow and fire. The gander, unable to adapt to the unpredictability of guerrilla warfare, faltered. More patrols vanished into the jungle, their deaths unseen but absolute. The enemy outposts, once imposing with their metallic spires and glowing watchtowers, began to crumble as sabotage took its toll. Explosions lit up the night, sending plumes of fire into the sky as the jungle swallowed what remained. The gander retaliated with brute force, unleashing heat-seeking drones and flamethrowers, trying to purge the land with fire. But fire was not enough. The jungle was too vast, too resilient. The thick canopy blocked satellite signals. The damp undergrowth refused to burn easily, and the creatures of the wild began to strike back in their own way. The gander weren't just fighting humans anymore. They were fighting Earth itself. Carlos's team pressed their advantage, dismantling the enemy forces piece by piece. They moved unseen, striking only when necessary, leaving behind a growing terror in their wake. By the time dawn's light filtered through the smoke-hazed trees, the jungle was littered with gander corpses. The invaders, once so certain of their superiority, had been reduced to broken bodies and shattered technology. Yet the war was far from over. In the distance, beyond the burning remnants of an enemy outpost, Carlos spotted movement. A single gander, limping, bloodied, barely able to stand, was making his way back toward the largest alien warship. Let him go. Carlos didn't need to chase him down. He wanted the survivor to return, to tell his commander what had happened, to let them know that Earth's wilderness was not theirs to take, that the jungle special forces were not mere soldiers, but something far deadlier, warriors of the untamed, defenders of the last wild places. Carlos turned away as the alien vanished into the distance. The warning had been given. The real war was about to begin. The jungle had become a battlefield, its once thriving expanse marred by fire and metal, yet it refused to surrender. Smoke curled through the canopy, the scent of scorched earth thick in the humid air. The remnants of the gander outposts lay in ruin, their metallic structures warped and shattered by relentless human resistance. The invaders had underestimated the land and those who protected it. Now, they were desperate. Captain Elias Carlos crouched behind the twisted remains of an alien dropship, its hull seared by the explosives his team had planted the night before. His heartbeat was steady, his rifle secured in his grip. 100 yards ahead, Gander reinforcements deployed in tight formations, their numbers swelling. Massive war machines, towering constructs of shifting metal and energy, stomped through the broken jungle, their mechanized limbs clearing debris with merciless efficiency. Above, Gander warships hovered, their sleek forms cutting through the sky, preparing for what Carlos knew was coming. A final assault. Lieutenant Alex Hales knelt beside him, his sharp eyes scanning the enemy forces. They've called in everything. No more patrols, no more scouts. This is it. Sergeant Nathan James, perched in the remains of a fallen tree, tightened his grip on his sniper rifle. They're bringing the whole damn fleet. Corporal Ryan Beckett adjusted the last of his explosives, his jaw tight. They know they can't win in the shadows. They want us in the open. Carlos nodded. The Gander had been forced into an unfamiliar kind of war, one where they could not predict their enemies' movements. The jungle had swallowed their confidence, stripping them of the technological advantage they wielded so mercilessly across other conquered worlds. Now, their only option was overwhelming force. A deep, resonant boom shattered the air as the first of the Gander warships fired its orbital cannons. Trees splintered into nothingness, the ground shuddering beneath the impact. The jungle trembled but did not yield. Even as flames licked at the edges of the battlefield, the land resisted, its spirit unbroken. Carlos exhaled. We fight here. We end it here. The squad moved with practiced precision, fading into the dense undergrowth before the Gander forces could fix their sights on them. The jungle, though wounded, remained a fortress. Carlos's team wove between trees and ruined structures, positioning themselves for the ambush that would determine Earth's fate. The first wave of Gander infantry advanced, their glowing weapons pulsing with charged energy. They moved as one, unrelenting in their march. Hales whispered a silent signal. Then, the jungle erupted. Explosions burst from beneath the invaders, hidden mines and tripwires igniting with deadly force. Shrapnel tore through armor, sending the first ranks crumpling to the ground. Beckett's explosives did their work well, turning the jungle's own fallen trees into lethal traps. The moment of confusion was all the opening Carlos needed. Now, James's sniper rifle cracked through the chaos, his shots finding their marks with brutal efficiency. Each round struck where armor was weakest, exposed joints, the seams of helmets, the delicate circuits that kept their exosuits functioning. The Gander reeled, their forces momentarily staggered. Carlos and Hales led the ground assault. Knives flashed in the moonlight, cutting through alien armor with ruthless precision. Carlos drove his blade deep into the throat of a Gander soldier, feeling the unnatural resistance before it gave way. Hales took down another, his combat training turning every movement into a lethal strike. The Gander fought back with relentless aggression. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, scorching the earth where Carlos had stood moments before. One of their massive war machines pivoted, its heavy cannons locking onto the human resistance. "Move!" Carlos shouted, diving just as a blast obliterated the ground where he had been crouched. The jungle was no longer merely a battleground. It was disintegrating under the sheer power of the Gander's last stand. Beckett scrambled to a vantage point, setting the last of his charges along the remains of an ancient tree, one of the few still standing. Need another few seconds. Carlos turned, raising his rifle to cover him. "You've got 5. The Gander were relentless. The war machine adjusted its aim, its cannons whirring as it prepared to fire again. The moment it locked onto them, Beckett detonated his charges. The ancient tree groaned, shuddering under the force of the explosion before it collapsed forward, its massive trunk crashing onto the enemy war machine. The impact sent a shockwave through the battlefield, crushing alien soldiers beneath its weight. Cheers erupted through Carlos's earpiece, but the battle was far from over. From the sky, the Gander flagship loomed, its presence an undeniable threat. The warship's underbelly began to glow, energy gathering in its cannons for a final strike. Carlos knew what was coming, an orbital bombardment that would raise the jungle entirely. They had to stop it. "Hales James with me," Carlos ordered. "Beckett, find us an opening." The team moved as one, weaving through the chaos toward the nearest alien dropship, still intact amidst the wreckage. It was their only chance. If they could reach the Gander's command center, they could disable the bombardment sequence before it was too late. Blaster fire rained down as they ran, but the jungle shielded them, offering cover in its dying breath. Beckett reached the dropship first, cutting through the last of the guards before signaling the all-clear. Carlos and the others rushed inside. Inside, the ship was cold, metallic, a stark contrast to the living world outside. The walls pulsed with alien energy, screens flickering with unreadable symbols. At the ship's core, a console gleamed, its interface a direct link to the Gander's command network. "Can you shut it down?" Carlos asked. Hales worked fast, fingers flying over the controls. "I can jam the targeting systems, but not for long." "Then do it." The console beeped in protest as Hales bypassed the Gander security measures. On the main screen, the targeting sequence flickered. The warship above hesitated, its cannons dimming as the interference took hold. Outside, the battlefield roared, the remaining human fighters pressing the advantage. The Gander forces, momentarily disoriented, faltered under the relentless assault. Then the console flashed red. "They're overriding the lockout," Hales warned. "We don't have time." Carlos's mind raced. The only way to ensure the warship never fired was to destroy it from within. "Set the dropship to overload," he said. "We take out their power core. We take them all with us." Beckett grinned. "I was hoping you'd say that." Explosives were placed in rapid succession, their charges primed. The dropship systems hummed, its energy core reaching unstable levels. Alarms blared, but it was already too late. "Go!" Carlos ordered. The team bolted from the ship, sprinting through the wreckage as the first tremors of the detonation began. They barely made it clear when the dropship erupted in a chain reaction, its energy core igniting in a violent explosion. Above, the Gander warship convulsed. Its once imposing form shuddered, its engines flickering as systems failed. One by one, its remaining vessels broke formation, retreating from the battlefield. Carlos watched as the flagship, the heart of the invasion, succumbed to its own destruction. Fire raged through its structure, tearing it apart in the sky before it crashed into the ruined jungle below. The battle was over. The Gander had fallen. Around him, the surviving fighters emerged from the chaos, their expressions weary but triumphant. The jungle, the wounded, still stood. Hales let out a breath, shaking his head. "Hell of a last stand." Carlos glanced at the smoldering remains of the warship. The invaders had come with arrogance, believing Earth was weak, believing its wilderness was nothing but an obstacle. They had been wrong. Carlos turned to his men. This was just the beginning. The jungle had survived, but there would always be another threat, and they would be ready. The battlefield smoldered, the acrid scent of scorched metal mingling with the damp, earthy aroma of the jungle. The land bore fresh scars. Blackened craters where once stood towering trees, but it had survived. The Gander, self-proclaimed masters of the stars, had fallen. Their ships lay in ruin, their war machines silent, their once mighty forces reduced to little more than scattered corpses among the vines and roots. Captain Elias Carlos exhaled slowly, the weight of the battle still pressing on his shoulders. His rifle, its barrel hot from relentless fire, hung loosely at his side. Around him, his men emerged from the haze, weary but victorious. Lieutenant Alex Hales wiped the sweat and grime from his face, his sharp eyes scanning the wreckage for any lingering threats. Sergeant Nathan James slung his sniper rifle over his back, his movements slow, deliberate, as if still expecting another fight. Corporal Ryan Beckett ran a hand over his explosives vest, checking what little remained. The jungle whispered around them, reclaiming what was rightfully its own. Already, vines curled around the fallen ships, tendrils creeping up the shattered Gander war machines as if nature itself was erasing the evidence of their presence. The silence that followed was not one of emptiness, but of resilience. The earth had fought back. It had won. A faint noise drew Carlos's attention. A single Gander, battered and broken, struggled to move near the wreckage of their flagship. Its once polished armor was dented and scorched, one of its legs twisted at an unnatural angle. Despite the damage, it still reached for its fallen weapon, clinging to its last shred of defiance. Carlos approached with measured steps, the jungle crunching softly beneath his boots. The alien's visor, cracked but still faintly glowing, tilted upward as Carlos loomed over it. Even now, there was no fear in its posture, only disbelief. "You don't understand," the Gander rasped, its voice distorted from the damage to its helmet. "This world, it was never meant to win." Carlos crouched, leveling his gaze with the defeated warrior. "That's your mistake," he said, voice even calm. "You thought this was just a planet, just a resource, just another conquest." He gestured around them, to the towering jungle, the thick canopy above, the roots twisting like veins beneath their feet. "Earth doesn't belong to us. It doesn't belong to anyone. You didn't fight humans. You fought the wild, and the wild never loses." The Gander let out something between a laugh and a cough, its body shuddering. "More will come," it wheezed. "They will not accept this defeat." Carlos stared at the dying invader for a long moment before standing. "Then we'll be waiting." The alien slumped, its breath rattling to a stop. Another enemy, another empire, had underestimated Earth. Another had paid the price. Hale stepped up beside him, his arms crossed. "They'll send scouts first," he said, ever the tactician. "Small incursions, testing our strength." James exhaled through his nose. "Let them try." Beckett tapped the small, portable console strapped to his forearm, eyes scanning the readings. "They were transmitting during the fight," he said, "not just to their reinforcements. This battle, it was broadcast to the entire Dominion." Carlos turned, processing the implications. The Gander weren't just losing here. They had lost in front of their entire empire. Humiliation was often more dangerous than defeat. "They'll see us as a threat now," Hales added, nodding toward the jungle. "Not just the military, the land itself." A slow smirk pulled at the corner of Carlos's mouth. "Good." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of fresh rain, as if the earth itself had decided to cleanse away the remnants of war. Overhead, the sky, once obscured by Gander warships, was clear again. Stars stretched endlessly above them, countless worlds watching, unaware that one insignificant planet had just rewritten its place in the cosmos. Carlos motioned to Beckett. "Patch me through their network." Beckett's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You sure? If they didn't think we were dangerous before—" "Exactly," Carlos said. "They need to understand." With a few rapid keystrokes, Beckett linked their communications to the Gander's galactic relay. Within moments, the jungle's clearing flickered with the glow of a projected holographic transmission, beaming Carlos's image across the stars. Not just to the remaining Gander forces, but to the worlds beyond. To any empire that thought Earth was ripe for conquest. Carlos stood tall, his face illuminated by the projection's blue light. His voice, steady and unyielding, carried across the cosmos. "This is Captain Elias Carlos of Earth's Jungle Special Forces. The Gander Dominion came to our world believing us weak. They believed the wilderness could be burned, that life here could be tamed." He let the silence stretch for a moment, letting the weight of the statement settle. They were wrong. Behind him, the jungle stretched vast and untamed, a silent testament to nature's resilience. The camera feed showed the wreckage of the once mighty alien warships, their twisted remains half consumed by vines and roots. Gander bodies lay where they had fallen, their superior technology rendered useless against the very land they had sought to conquer. This planet is not an easy target, Carlos continued, his tone darkening. It will not fall, and those who come to take from it, those who mock its strength, will meet the same fate as the Gander. He stepped closer to the projection center, his expression sharpening to something almost primal. Let this be a warning to any who would threaten Earth. We do not need fleets. We do not need orbital weapons. We have something far older, far more powerful. We have the wild. Beckett tapped the console, cutting the transmission. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Hales let out a slow breath. That was one hell of a statement. They'll think twice before sending more, James murmured. Carlos turned, his gaze sweeping over the jungle, the land that had fought alongside them. It had been wounded, yes, but not broken. Never broken. It would regrow, stronger than before. And so would they. They would always be watching, always waiting, because the war was never over. It had only just begun.